Hello, today I'm going to talk to you about how to use clay to create a coral reef relief sculpture. These sculptures are a great way to explore biology of the coral reef as well as art. We're going to sketch out some ideas and research some coral reef, different types of biology in a coral reef first, and then we're going to start to work on our sculptures. For this project, we're going to use low-fire earthenware clay. You could also use a salt dough clay that you make at home if you want to. This sculpture on the right-hand side was painted with watercolors, so you can see that you can really achieve rich, vibrant colors with watercolors. And the piece on the left has been glazed with Blick low-fire glazes and has been fired a second time. So you could do either one of these options with this project. There are a few things that I considered when I was coming up with my sketches. I like to include a little bit of negative space in my relief sculptures, so I drew that in each of these different compositions. Keep in mind that coral reefs are organic, so asymmetrical designs are going to work the best for this. You don't want anything to be too uniform because we're talking about nature. And so while different parts of the biology might have a repetition, we don't want that to be too uniform or too symmetrical. So another thing that I thought about when I was creating my sketches was what areas of these might be inset relief, which means pressed in texture, what areas might be low relief, sticking out a small amount from the surface, and what areas of the sculpture might be high relief. So if I was going to show this, you can see the negative space in here. Another thing that you can see is the inset or pressed in texture relief. There's some low relief, some parts that stick out very, very little on here. And then there are some high relief pieces like these pieces of coral and seagrass that are just sticking out from the surface. So those are some things to think about when you're sketching. The next thing we're going to do is get our clay out and start to construct. I'm starting out with a clay slab, which is going to give me the flat surface for my relief. And I like to cut these into a square-like shape, but you could definitely leave some of the edges a little bit more organic where you could round them. So I'm going to cut that out, and then I'm going to show you a couple different forming techniques that you may or may not want to use. I'm going to cut out my negative space in here, just looking at my sketch for a reference. And I also like to put a hole in these so that I can hang them up on the wall for display. And you could do that by using a paper clip or a sharp object just to cut a hole, or you could use a piece of straw, which is what I like to do, and just punch a hole in there. So I'm going to come in about a finger width down, and I'm just going to poke my hole in there so that I have that for hanging. You don't want to put the hole too close to the edge, or the clay might be too brittle and not able to support the weight of the relief sculpture when you hang it up. So I've got two holes in here. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to use pinch pots, coils, and slabs to attach to your slab relief. So one of the things that you might want to attach are coils. So coils are just long rounded strands of clay. I like to squeeze the clay in my hands a little bit, and actually if you do this, that creates an interesting, almost coral-like texture. You can also roll it onto your placemat or working surface to get a little bit more of a smoother appearance. So I'm just gonna roll these out. So that's good for coral, seagrasses, and things like that. So when I make these, I like to roll out a bunch and then cut and gather multiple pieces together so that I can attach them onto my coral reef. You could attach them on like this and make sure that you're slipping and scoring, or you could attach them a little bit more flat. So that just depends on whether you want more of a high relief or low relief effect when you're putting those onto your surface. It's good to have a good variety of sizes and have multiple so that you can attach them. Another type of forming technique we have are pinch pots. So pinch pot starts out as a ball. So I'm just going to roll the clay into a ball-like shape. And then I'm going to stick my thumb, or if it's a smaller ball, you could just stick your finger into it. a smaller finger, like your pinky finger. And I'm going to pinch and turn that. And that makes a really interesting shape. You could, I'm just gonna poke a marker in at the bottom here, and you could attach those like this, so that they're more like a cup shape. Another thing that you could do is you could attach them like this, so that they're a little bit more of a dome shape, a little bit more like an urchin type of shape, and you could add some textures to that coming out from the hole. And so those look great when clustered together. You can also just roll small balls of clay, slip and score those on, and you can use different objects. I love marker caps because they have interesting texture, but you could attach those on like that also. So then the third type of forming technique is, so we've got coils, pinch pots, and then slabs. So you could sketch out something into your clay slab. So I could sketch out some seagrasses. And what's good about this is if you don't like how it turns out, you can just use your finger to smooth over it, and you don't have to commit to that specific shape. So we could sketch out some more seagrass. Type forms. Then you can go around the outside and just press in with your needle tool or a sharp object, a bent paper clip, and you can cut those out and form them the way that you want them to be. And then you can attach those on to your slab by slipping and scoring. Now that I have a good amount of forms made and I know where I'm going to be putting them on my sculpture, I'm going to go ahead and move those off to the side, and I'm going to press some inset texture into my slab before I start to score and slip the other pieces on. To do this, you can use any type of tool or object, and I just like to press it in and just repeat that texture by pressing a few times with each object. So that the back of this stick makes a pretty interesting texture. I'm gonna use this marker has some round. It's good to overlap the textures a little bit. I've got a plastic fork here that could make some interesting textures on there as well. So just play around with pressing different objects in or dragging different objects across. And so I know that these are going to be some of the areas that are going to be showing, but I'm not going to worry about pressing textures into the areas that are going to be covered by my forms. So now I'm going to start to attach the forms on, and it's very important that you score and slip these. And you can actually use pre-made slip, but for this, since the clay is nice and fresh, I'm going to just be using water. So to do that, I'm going to apply water to the surface where the clay pieces are going to be attached. I'm going to use a sharp object. You could use the end of a paper clip, a toothpick, a needle tool, and I'm just going to really score the surface. So that's scratching it. If you are familiar with the cross-hatching technique, it's very similar to that. Then I'm going to take the objects that I'm going to be attaching. You need to add water to the area that's going to be attached. And you also need to score the side that will be attached, and make sure that you press it in nice and firmly. So water and your score marks, and then press it into place. And you're just going to be repeating that for all of the pieces that you're going to be attaching to your slab. And this might be a little bit time consuming, but it is a very important step to take to make sure that your pieces do not pop off once they have been fired or once they dry. So sometimes they make it through the drying step, but very infrequently will they make it through both the drying and the firing step. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with all of my pieces. Now that all of my forms have been attached, I now need to think about textures of the pieces that I attached. It's not good to have all of your pieces be smooth. If you look at photographs of coral reefs, you can see that they're very rich with texture. So you can use any items or objects to add texture to your forms. And so I'm going to just make sure that I'm paying attention to those details and adding some textures and details to each of the forms that I have attached. It's really going to help making this look more realistic and less cartoony. And so we really want to think about the textures that we are adding on each of these and the forms. Really think about how you can add detail to the forms as you are going in to finish your piece. And there you have it. The construction has been completed, and I'm going to let this dry. Make sure that if you are doing this with younger students, you want to make sure that the pieces aren't too thin. You also want to make sure that the pieces aren't too thick. But after this dries, it will be low fired in the kiln, and then it will be either painted with watercolor or finished with glaze. My piece that's been finished with glaze, just want to make sure that you coat everything with 2 to 3 layers of glaze. An excellent artist to reference for this project is Courtney Madison. And here's my coral reef relief that has been painted with watercolor. One of the things you can see is that you can really layer that watercolor, and you can water it down and layer it and achieve a lot of different hues. So I really like how watercolor turns out. It's time consuming, but you can really build up and accent the textures by using watercolor. If you want a gloss shine after you've done the watercolor, you can always coat it with a layer of gloss Mod Podge or gloss floor wax, acrylic floor wax. So those are just my tips for this project. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Have a great day.